Welcome, everybody. Good evening. My name is Morgan, and I'm a student studying graphic design here at Pratt. I'm also an intern of NIPERG, the New York Public Interest Research Group. NIPERG is a New York State's largest student de-accredited nonprofit organization, and we are members within the New York Renews Coalition to pass the Climate, Jobs, and Justice Package. When we organize together, we will win. Thank you to everyone who came together to help make this event happen, and a special thanks to the Office of Public Advocate for organizing this panel. The discussion will take approximately 1 hour with time at the end for audience questions. If you have a question for the panelists, please write it on one of the index cards and we will try to answer it at the end. To continue to support our efforts, please follow us and our partners on Twitter and Instagram. For students in the Pratt community, you can get involved right here on campus by joining NIPERG's Pratt chapter. Our office is located in Chapel Hall, 007, and we have meetings every Wednesday at 8 p.m. in the student union. Stop by our table on your way out to learn more about how you can take action on campus. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and let's get on with the program. Starting off tonight is a message from New York City Public Advocate, Jumaane Williams.
Blessings, everyone. Love and light to you all. And thank you all for joining us for this critical conversation on New York State of Energy. I want to thank my staff and our partners for putting this event together. Energy goals and climate justice are inextricably linked, as many of the communities who have seen the most devastating impacts of climate change are Black, brown, and too often economically disinvested. From Superstorm Sandy to Hurricanes Irene and Ida, floods have taken lives and destroyed livelihoods. Power outages have disrupted communities, and they have become all too frequent in so many neighborhoods. Every time we see a storm coming, we know exactly what areas and people will be hit the hardest, and yet it keeps happening, and we don't rebuild in a more resilient way. All of this comes as our rates continue to climb, as energy companies continue to profit, often historically. New York State must center renewable energy and environmental justice, especially for communities left behind by economic advancement or victimized by environmental abuses on the path to public power. Our energy infrastructure, much of it is centered on fossil fuels, is built for the profit of power companies, not the proliferation of power for the people. And that has to change. My office has been advancing the cause of public power for years, and events like today help us to mount momentum. In today's forum, the conversations it launches and the movement it's a part of, we'll hear from individuals and organizations dedicated to ensuring that we enforce the regulations we have in place now, whether the CLCPA on the state level or Local Law 97 in the city, and that we move forward with the new policies that grapple with this moment, seizing current opportunities and preventing future harm to our climate, our communities. Whether in making our water free of contamination, our buildings free of harmful emissions, or our job growth sustainable, we cannot choose between economic and environmental justice. Advancing our city and state means advancing these principles together. Again, thank you for joining this forum and for joining us in the work to follow. Peace.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kashif Hussain. I'm the Deputy Public Advocate for Infrastructure and Environmental Justice. Piggyback on what Public Advocate said, from the South Bronx to Sunset Park, from East Brooklyn to Southeast Queens and Rockaways, fossil fuel infrastructure has plagued our communities. Historically, we have seen buildings constructed without having environmental adaptation or mitigation built into the design. These buildings are continuously impacting our communities. In our own backyard, we can see peaker plants, waste transfer stations, wastewater treatment plants, bus depots, and last mile facilities. While the dangers include pollution-related health hazards, it is also affects truck traffic and contributes to unsafe streets. With high asthma rates and ever-increasing fossil fuel energy prices, it is crucial that we move towards a more sustainable and renewable future. New York's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, passed in 2019, was the most ambitious plan in the country to address this. But without any funding, it doesn't have any teeth. We've gathered here today a panel of experts from a wide range of organizations and community groups at the forefront of these issues in New York to discuss where we are and how we can all organize to tackle the vital issues of our survival. Here today are Lori Wheelock from Public Utility Law Project, Lavinia Reynolds from Uprose, Eunice Coe from New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, and Dariela Rodriguez from the Point CDC. So without further ado, let's dive into our panel discussion. So the first question is, since 2019, the residents and advocates working alongside elected officials have been demanded to fully fund and implement CLCPA. Post-CLCPA, there are other legislations that have been proposed in both New York State Assembly and Senate. These legislations speak to transitioning away from fossil fuel, creating renewable green jobs, and building renewable structures. What are the current discussions, actions, and progress on these legislation and policy?
To go first on this one. Thank you to the public advocate and the team for having us here on this important discussion. Just a little bit about the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, which I work for. We are a member-led coalition, actually joined by two members here, the Point and Uprose, who represent the most environmentally burdened communities here in New York City. And so what Nisha does, work mostly at the city and state level, working on legislation to advance our climate and environmental justice goals and address the issues from extreme heat, so as you mentioned, the proliferation of last mile warehouses, among air quality issues, and many other things. Just a little bit about Nisha. We are a member of New York Renews, which is another coalition. This is a 340 member organization that spans New York State, also ranges from faith-based groups, environmental justice groups, labor groups, so it really is a diverse coalition. And we have what we call the Climate Jobs and Justice Package, which you mentioned. This comprehensive plan is supposed to help New York rapidly decarbonize, make our state healthier and more equitable, ensure a just transition for our workers, and lastly, help create an accessible green economy for all. So this package is a suite of legislation, suite of bills, really have three key demands. One, like you mentioned, fully funding and implementing the CLCPA, passed in 2019, but we haven't seen any real funding or climate action coming out from that, so we want to actually realize the CLCPA. The second key demand is building renewable energy for all and good green union jobs. And lastly, making the polluters polluters like ultra-rich pay for what they owe in terms of environmental damages to our communities as well as our environment. So part of that package, we're also asking for the inclusion of $10 billion in the fiscal year 2024 One House budget as part of this legislative package. And so the budgetary centerpiece of CJJP, which is the package I just mentioned, is Senator Harkin's is proposed but not yet introduced Climate and Community Protection Fund. So this fund would structure and allocate this $10 billion in the One House climate justice allocations into 4 different pools that would direct funding to communities, workers, and small businesses. These 4 funds are the Climate Jobs and Infrastructure Fund, which is really about increasing building efficiency and upgrading our energy infrastructure. Community-directed Climate Solutions Fund, which is directing money to community-driven and led climate and environmental solutions. So really funding grassroots-led energy planning, reducing local emissions, and etc. The community and worker transition assistance, and then the energy affordability account. So that's just a little bit about the CJJP, which again is the legislative package that New York Renews is really championing this session. Do you have any more technical? No? All right, go for it.
Hi everybody, I'm Dariela and I'm the Director of Community Development at the Point CDC, which is a 29-year-old organization in Hunts Point that really started as a place to do youth leadership development work around art, using art and culture. But in order to be leaders in the movement around environmental justice and understanding that we don't have the luxury of being able to just like do fun stuff, but that the fun stuff that we do in our organization has to actually impact the conditions that we live in. And I really appreciate being in panels where someone else can cover a lot of that technical information, because the conversations we really are having are like, we're one of a handful of frontline organizations, grassroots organizations that are leading and steering the New York Renews Coalition. We have been talking about how do we define resiliency in our neighborhoods? How do we, with the implementation of the CLCPA, not repeat the mistakes that allow the wealthiest to be able to be the owners of the so-called solutions, but like that our long list of, if you meet all these things in your projects and in your solutions, then we meet the racial issues that we have in our neighborhood. We talk about economy in our neighborhood. We talk about a walk to work neighborhood. We talk about a just transition that actually means that people in our neighborhoods will be the ones that have these jobs and have community owned infrastructure that can solve a problem that's beyond just like another Band-Aid solution. So in our organization and in our neighborhood, like as we talk about the implementation of the CLCPA, one of the biggest questions and the biggest things that we talk about is how do we ensure that this is an opportunity to create wealth that's community-owned wealth, that we're educating and learning together based on experiences from people that actually are impacted by these issues, and that they don't only get to like talk about the issues, but they actually get to make decisions around how these issues are addressed. And then beyond that, they get to own the infrastructure and the ways in which those solutions are being, implemented throughout our neighborhoods. And that's really important for us because throughout the state, like we're looking at people that are facing environmental justice issues in very different ways across our state. And when you're in a neighborhood where children are literally more susceptible to COVID, to asthma, to disease, to being hospitalized because of the infrastructure in our neighborhood, then that conversation means something a little different in Hunts Point than it does mean upstate. And doesn't mean that it's not as important, but by having a coalition like New York Renews and having the transition and the conversation around the solutions happen this way, we actually ensure that people in our community are the ones that are making decisions, but also owning, and that those are like generational impacts for poverty, racism, and other things in our neighborhood that we really struggle from.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Lavinia Reynolds. I am the Energy Democracy Coordinator at UPROSE. Thank you again to the Public Advocate's Office for inviting us to this panel. And thank you guys for opening the conversation so well. So a little bit about UPROSE. UPROSE is a multiracial, intergenerational climate justice organization. We're community-based, which means that we essentially staff the community. And much of our work over the past couple of years has focused on community-based planning to operationalize a just transition. So what is a just transition, just to back it up a little bit? So one thing I think that differentiates the people on the stage from larger big greens is that we define climate success as not just emissions reductions, but improvements in health, community wealth, and access to jobs. So when we see big greens talk about, oh, this solution is gonna like reduce X, Y, and Z tons of carbon dioxide, we're like, great. What about particulate matter emissions? Because those are the emissions that impact asthma visits to hospitals and things like that. So we really take a holistic approach to a just transition to renewable energy. So a just transition overall is we are thinking about moving away from an extractive economy, which is one that uses fossil fuels, extracts labor and extracts natural resources from our communities, and overall just harms usually Black and brown communities. And we're moving to a regenerative economy, which is one that invests in our communities and one that values our natural resources. And as Dottie was talking about, we were talking about infrastructure that is community owned, in which community members have autonomy over how it's used, and where people get to share the revenues, and the revenues aren't directed towards Wall Street shareholders. So I think I'm gonna end, well, I guess I could talk a little bit about Sunset Park. Okay, all right, so Sunset Park is located in Southwest Brooklyn. It's right on the waterfront. It is an EJ community. It's a working class immigrant community. There are 3 peaker plants, 3 fossil fuel plants located in Sunset Park. We also have the BQE, which means that there are about 125,000 plus cars and trucks running through our community every day. It's a lot of particulate matter pollution. We also have a waste transfer site. On top of that, we're also home to the largest significant maritime area in New York City, which means that we have a lot of opportunity to use industrial space to help kind of like move this transition to renewable energy forward. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now,
good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Vila. I go by she, hers pronouns. I'm the executive director of the Public Utility Law Project. And again, I want to thank the Public Advocate and NYPIRG for hosting us tonight. It's really exciting just to be back and be able to have these conversations in person, and really exciting because we each do have kind of a different experience and viewpoint, but together we're able to push for the change that we all want to see. And so my world is very, very narrow. I'm all about utilities. And so my mom's always like, what are the utilities? What do you do all day, Lori? I don't get it. The utilities are all the services that go into your home that make it safe. So it's your electric, it's your gas if you have it. It's how you heat your apartment, your home. It's how you drink your water. It's your telecommunications. Internet is a utility. It should be a right. And we've learned so much over the last few years about how it really isn't right now. So that's our world. And we specifically help low-income individuals by the definition set by New York State. And that definition is very narrow. 60% area median income, which is nothing. A family of one is like less than $2,000 a month. How can anyone survive on that? So our goal is to help people with their energy burdens, to try and uplift them and fight against the utilities that are constantly trying to raise rates. So we operate in 2 spheres. We do direct service work. We have a hotline. We offer our services free, just like legal aid. If you have a utility issue, if National Grid or Con Edison are sending you termination notices, you can contact us. We fight on people's behalf. We go against the utility to get financial assistance, to get energy efficiency programs, to help them be safe in their home and prevent them from losing their service because they fell behind on their bill. We also then learn from those experiences. We learn from those stories. We see patterns of bad behavior, and we push for policy and change at the state and federal level. And this period of time has been particularly difficult. It's the first time since 2020 where people are getting shut off because they've fallen behind. We have people calling us in tears because they've come home and Con Edison's there, ready to shut them off because they're behind on their electric bill. And so it's been very difficult, but we have been fighting at a state level, and we're fighting to protect people so that they can have an affordable way to live. So right now we're in the Con Edison rate case. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but we learn from those experiences on the ground to push for that change. And it's been a very difficult time, but this is our time to push forward for energy affordability and all the different environmental goals we need to hit here in New York State. So excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Darrell, you mentioned something about racial and social disparities. So this next question is in line with that. What are the tangible benefits and investments that communities can expect and ask for from climate funding that will address those racial and social disparities?
So the CLCPA, we talked about it for so long, and we were like, how, this is what we need to do as a state, and we need this, legislation to give us power so that we have a guide for how we make, such aggressive goals and, make that happen in New York, right? And one example of something that's happening is that since the CLCPA, there's been all this interest and attention towards building these solutions, but the CLCPA really says on there, you must check in with organizations that have been on the front lines, have been in the process of designing these ideas and that their people are so impacted, right? So it forces folks to have to check with us. So that's one thing, right? Right now, because of that, I got hired in 2019 at the point with one goal being to build a social, community-owned solar project. And we've been struggling so much with that, but because of the CLCPA, now people have to invest in a solar project that's community-owned in our neighborhood if they want to come to anything in our neighborhood, right? And what that looks like is that we understand that we have to address systemic issues that are like from white supremacy, that are capitalism, that you know, years and years and years of poverty that's caused by oppression in our neighborhood cannot just be undone by putting infrastructure in there, right? Like, we're in a neighborhood that's nicknamed the Toxic Triangle, Asthma Alley. Those are the nicknames of the neighborhoods that we're in. And so if you're going to build something and make money and look for solutions, one of the benefits that does impact the racial and systemic issues that we've gone through is that people have to check with us, and that New York State isn't just going to put through and invest in projects and allow projects to happen that don't have that aspect of checking in with communities that have been in that neighborhood and been doing that work. And that was something that was really hard before. And I'm not saying that I'm really not up here saying that it's going to be perfect and that because of the CLCPA, nothing is going to, you know, pass by us. But when you have to invest in those neighborhoods and people have to be employed from these neighborhoods and things have to be built that are community owned, then that's breaking generational curses and building generational wealth and addressing issues that have for decades crossed different oppressive systems, not just racism, not just environmental justice, not just health, but all of these things. And that, you know, the solutions have to look at all of those things and have to require investments that we get to make decisions for, not just slapping a solar project or a wind project or whatever, but that those projects have to have aspects of giving back to those communities and having community ownership be part of that.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, so I think that's a great point about having to check in with communities. And I think, you know, one other point is that communities have plans and visions for what we need as solutions like in our neighborhoods. So, you know, it's now at a point where state and federal are listening to these community plans, and we have the funds to invest in them. So, for example, one of Uprose's plan is called the GRID. This plan is for how we want to retain a working waterfront that invests in green manufacturing in the significant maritime industrial area that I mentioned earlier. We want to create a hub that attracts businesses, that provides family-supporting jobs, and maintains our walk to work community. This is a huge comprehensive plan that was, I think, developed in 2017 based on about a decade of community planning. It's now being updated to reflect changes due to COVID-19. But there's like a wealth of experience and knowledge in these communities, also aided by people like you, because Brad is definitely helping us revamp that plan. So yeah, that's just to say that there are solutions that are being built by communities, and we deserve to be listened to. So.
Yeah, I don't think there's a shortage of benefits that communities, particularly low-income communities and communities of color, will see. I think particularly with the Climate and Community Protection Fund and the $10 billion ask, there are some benefits that we're asking for and hope to see. One, improvements in public health and lower asthma and respiratory illnesses, particularly for communities who live close to fossil fuel plants or highways. So we can hope to see a dramatic decrease in respiratory issues related to air quality. We can also expect to see good green unionized family-sustaining jobs. We're not just talking about low-wage jobs, but really career-track union jobs. Studies show that implementing the CLCPA will create up to 150,000 good family-sustaining jobs. So there is a huge opportunity there in installing solar panels, maintaining wind turbines, retrofitting buildings over the next 10 years. Also, in terms of on the investment side, the CLCPA does mandate 40% of climate funds go to, as you mentioned, the state's disadvantaged communities. It's being finalized at that definition, but we hope to see up to 40% of funding go to frontline communities. reduce energy bills, better, cleaner transportation systems. Yeah, I think there's like, it's endless, I think, in terms of the benefits communities can see from climate action.
And one of the things that's really helpful being a lawyer is that the CLCPA is a law. And so if you come up against someone who disagrees, or let's say it is a utility, and utilities in New York primarily make money, they profit by building. And so a lot of them, all of them, still really want to keep up the gas infrastructure. They want to keep going with the dirty fossil fuel. Some of them are moving with the electrification too, but they still are doing gas infrastructure projects. So it gives us the chance to be like, there's a law. Also, disadvantaged communities, guess what? There's maps. Even though it's not a final definition, there is something there, and you need to respect that. And you probably won't be surprised, it's hard. It's very, very hard. I can't tell you how many times we've sent the maps to people and been like, you have to deal with this. You need to acknowledge this. And so having that law in place is very helpful. It's a strong base for us all to work off of. And we can say, yes, it says maybe this percentage of benefits, but you can do more. So don't do the minimum, let's do more, and we can push the conversation. And so it's this nice wave, if you will. We have a base to work off of, and we know that we have to get to the end, but it's like a constant kind of battle along the way, but one that I think all of us are pretty up to.
Thank you for those answers. So involved in the governor's budget proposals on energy and climate, what are your group's thoughts? Are there any recommendations? How can the public get involved and track the budget process through April 1, 2023?
Yeah, I think, our takeaway is, and you kind of said it's not doing the bare minimum, but more. And so just to frame, I think we need bolder, quicker, transparent, and more concrete actions than what was laid out in the governor's budget proposal, and not just half measures and delays. We also think we need accountability, and we're not defining that as like punishment, but really the bridging and building of relationships, like genuine relationships between parties. So I'll point out two specific things in the budget proposal, specifically as it relates to energy, just to bolster my point here. But on the NYPA piece, so we think allowing NYPA to construct and operate renewable energy is a step in the right direction and will help ultimately New York State achieve the CLCPA mandates. But we believe it can't be just all carrots and sticks. NYPA can move up the timeline to transition their fossil fuel power plants, and many of them located in EJ communities before the 2035 date they have set themselves. And beyond NYPA, we do need dedicated funding, like I said, from the executive branch to update our antiquated transmission systems and procure more renewable energy to make our grid greener and more resilient. So this would also support the electrification of transit and buildings. So we really want to make sure that CLCPA is fully funded and implemented, not watered down. Again, like you're saying, not just do the bare minimum and more. And the other thing I would just point out is the cap and invest. The governor did mention in her State of the State address recently and in her budget proposal, a cap and invest program, which is just largely concerning for EJ communities because of what we've seen elsewhere in the country, where it often can exacerbate existing air pollution hotspots or create new ones in EJ communities, which is obviously a non-starter for us. So this needs to be done right and done well. Otherwise, if not, the gap between the haves and have-nots will really widen, particularly for the communities of color and low-income communities. So there are many ways to reduce emissions beyond cap and invest, and also many ways to raise revenue, and that's something we really want to stress. Cap and invest will only get us like partly there, not even halfway, like a fraction. We still do need that dedicated funding from the executive branch. But like I said, one of the key demands in the CJJP is making polluters and the ultra-rich pay. So there are a few bills, like what we call revenue raisers, in this legislative package that essentially end fossil fuel subsidies and force fossil fuel companies and bigger corporations to pay.
So yeah, we are in a budget sprint. The budget came out like last week, and the legislature, the Assembly and Senate are holding hearings right now. So next Tuesday is the environmental conservation hearing, human services, which is all like the financial assistance programs for our individuals that need public assistance, is Monday, and so we're all in the thick of it. And then right around Valentine's Day is when they start working on the one houses, which is where they counter the governor and say, this is what we want as the New York State Assembly, and this is what the Senate wants. And it all coalesces in like 1 month, around March 15th, they'll be voting, and then negotiate, April 1, it's done. And it's so fast. So all of us, I'm sure, are like taking that deep breath, and then we're just jumping in. And so at least in our role when it comes to utilities, the governor actually said during the State of the State energy affordability, and I'm like, whoa, the governor has done that, so that's exciting. And then we saw the language, and I'm like, okay, there are programs in there. She has 2 proposals to address energy affordability. And since 2016, New York State has this goal that all low-income households shouldn't be spending more than 6% on their energy costs. It's something that's very underutilized. Only about half of households meet that target right now, so we're really trying to push it. We're trying to push the state to say, okay, you have to make the energy affordable, especially electricity. Like, we need to move towards it. Let's make it affordable so people can stay in their homes, be healthy and safe. So there's programs in there. There's a couple of proposals, each of them for like $200 million. And we're just like, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. Like $200 million sounds a lot, but not when you have 1.1 million households that need to get to that 6% energy target. So very similar. It's like there's a base to work from, but we need to push. And she needs to hear from groups that aren't just poll and you know, us. We need to hear from people who are living the situation and say we need more, and this is why. Another thing that Polk will be doing next week is saying it can't just be ratepayers and it can't just be the state budget. The utilities need to step up. They need to put money on the table. The Biden administration has federal funds for the utilities to apply for, to strengthen the transmission lines so that things like Hurricane Sandy and the devastation that hit will have a stronger electric grid. And we're really pushing the utilities to apply for it. Things have been very slow though, and the cynical me is like, why? Why aren't they applying for these federal funds? They could be getting federal money to strengthen the electric grid, and you need to do that work. I don't think they can get a rate of return off of it, and that's how they make their money. They build, they get a rate of return, they build, they get money. And so it's very frustrating, and we'd be pushing them next week during the legislative sessions because it can't just be us, it can't just be the state. We need them to step up too.
My answer is kind of quick because Lavinia said earlier, communities have plans. We've been talking about this for so long. We know exactly how much money, we know exactly how to use the money. We know exactly, like, that's why we've been doing this for so long. We've been building power around that, being able to design solutions, plans, budgets internally. And so if we have any recommendations, I think it's like, let us activate those ideas and plans, and let us activate the way that we want to spend that money and that we know is necessary, because we do know that it's not enough. And so just really leaning on that, like, we know the answers, we have the solutions, we have the plans, we have ideas of how much it's going to cost, and so just making those things happen is really important.
Before we ask the next question, I want to ask Team Public Advocate, are we doing on time? Good? Okay, awesome. So the next question is, more than ever, it is vital and necessary to empower and strengthen the leadership that is representative of the communities and neighborhoods experiencing environmental injustices for decades. How can we stress the importance to community members to learn about getting involved and joining these extremely important campaigns and projects?
I talk about this a lot. All our work is about getting people involved, right? And people understand their experiences. They know exactly what they're going through. So it's not that they don't want to get involved. I think that we've historically tokenized community members in spaces where we're asking for their expertise and then they give advice, and then they go home, and none of that they've shared is put into plans and put into actual decision making. And so I think we've been fighting really for positions that are powerful, that are decision making positions for community members, and that we the measure of not just success for the solutions, but also the way that we gather data, the way that we get the ideas, the way that we have the conversations, who designs the agendas and those tools really determines the kind of participation from members of our community, right? So if I'm inviting you to a meeting and I'm telling you it's really important for us to talk to you and we really want to hear what you have to say, and then we take notes and we send you on your way and we give you like a sandwich and we say thank you for coming, and you go home and 3 months later you see that we're talking about this again, but none of what you've decided and none of what you've shared actually makes its way into implementation, don't call me again. Right, and so really, and so even for us in our positions, I think that we even get invited to be in advisory roles and all kind of seats and meetings that take 3 hours, and nothing is implemented from what we talk about. And it's incredibly frustrating for us, for me, but I can imagine that it's even more frustrating when you're a community member who came after work, who got a babysitter, who like tried to figure it out when English is your second language, and you share your experience of what you're going through every day and your ideas and your knowledge, and then none of it actually makes it anywhere. And so if we want to say community members are important and community participation is important, then it has to be valued and it has to mean something. It has to be funded. It has to be turned into decision making, and not just like advice and not just a tokenized way of saying we've checked off the box. We had community members come. We did a meeting. We opened it up for comments, and the way that we're even asking for comments is something that our community members don't understand. So on the community level, this is a really important question for us because it keeps coming up. Like, we want people to lead and we want community members to be together and be in these processes, but then we actually don't value what they bring to those conversations.
Quickly, I just want to say that if you have any questions that you have written on your index cards, you can pass it to David, who's in. So David, just collect all the questions from the audience. Thank you. Go ahead.
Cool. Okay. I guess from the perspective of folks in the audience who are listening, in terms of like what y'all can do to be supportive of the work that we're doing, I would say like really learning about the climate justice movement and the environmental justice movement as distinct from the Big Greens movement. Uppers is a part of the Climate Justice Alliance, which posts and has a ton of resources on everything related from like federal legislation. Uppers will post resources on things that are happening in our community. So just like be aware of when like big debates around environmental issues pop up. Be aware that you're like what the narratives that you're being fed and what the frontline communities are saying about a certain issue. Because often it'll be slightly different, sometimes 180 different from what Big Greens are saying, because again, we're prioritizing the lives of people and the like, health and dignity of people as opposed to just simply carbon emissions.
Yeah, I agree with Dottie point that like the community leadership is there. It's not like there are people who care or invested in their own lives. It's really that's what climate change impacts really are. At the end of the day, is just disruptions to your everyday life. But I would say though, for our electeds and for other people to really care and understand the importance, I feel like the more we can talk about not only the tangible like impacts of climate change and environmental exposure, but also the positive impacts and benefits. And we talked about this in your earlier questions, reduced cooling and heating bills we're talking about. It's about like greener, more accessible transportation. It's about open space. It's about your kid like not being able to get to school because his school is flooded or the bus route. Less people dying in their apartments from extreme heat, which is how most people die, and disproportionately Black New Yorkers specifically. So like the more we can talk about that to the people in power, to like to understand the importance of these issues just to like the fabric of our lives, I think that's key. And then I guess like what you can do, I totally agree with Lavinia, be circumspect about what you're hearing in the source of information. Go to people that can be trusted. Sign up for the New Yorker News, newsletters, actions, there are tons of things, toolkits, things they put together so that it makes it very easy for people like you in the audience to engage and take action. So yeah, I would try to verify and look up what trusted organizations are doing in the space.
And I'll just try to go on the value piece. At least in our world, we've been working for many, many years now to be like, okay, so the way the utilities increase people's rates is they have these rate cases and they come in and they say, we want to increase rates on people. And they have an 11-month court case, essentially. We would go region by region in the state just saying, okay, you're empowered. You have the ability to fight back. Do you want to join the rate case? Awesome. We'll support you more as a team. These rate cases are hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands and thousands of pages, very technical, very difficult. And so we've fought to have legislation pass that would give groups like us the ability to file for reimbursement of our expenses with the state. And we're like, this is great. This will support small local groups who say, you know what, we don't want that pipeline in our backyard. Or you know what, this is too expensive. Why are you using our money on fossil fuel extension and not this project? And it passed both houses last year. They're so excited. And then the governor vetoed it. And she said if there was like no cap on how much small stakeholders could get, that there was already, a state representative that, took care of the public interest. And it's just frustrating. And we're not going to give up. I think she just didn't hear the message, the importance, the uniqueness, the value that every single group has and how specific it is. And so even just that one example, it's just that we have to keep fighting. And it can be tiring at times, but having you all behind us, is really, really powerful. So, we appreciate you all, and it's exciting to be here.
Thank you, everyone. That brings us to the next segment of questions and answers, followed by the closing remarks by our office, and we hand it over to Nyberg after that. But before we do that, we just want to give you an opportunity for one minute each to give a closing remarks.
Oh, we're doing Q&A here.
I guess there's this overwhelming issue, and there's so many of them that we see every day, and it could make you feel, I'm in this work for very different reasons. Like, I didn't go to school for this. I live in the Bronx. I'm a mom. I cross the streets that every day I'm like, why should a child cross 8 lanes of the Bruckner in order to get to their park, right? And so if we look at these issues as an overwhelming amount of different kinds of issues that we have to figure out answers for, we won't want to do anything about it. We'll be so overwhelmed. And so I think the message really is like, join an organization that already exists, that's doing something that you care about. Talk to people that care about the things that you care about, and see how your expertise, your experience can support organizations and campaigns that already exist, so that we can strengthen those campaigns and those projects and those organizations, instead of being scrambling to find solutions for things that all have the same root cause problems.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So yeah, I just wanted to say that this work is absolutely not easy. It's rebuilding or first breaking down systems that have disenfranchised and marginalized Black and brown communities for literally centuries. They've evolved and changed and gotten smarter, and as they've changed and gotten smarter, we've had to get smarter and fight back even harder. For one, we're trying to build systems that invest in communities and invest in health and prioritize community autonomy. And we're essentially creating something that hasn't really been done before, which means that some of our projects take forever. And which means that you might run into people who think they're doing the right thing but aren't necessarily doing the right thing, have good intentions but don't really want to listen to people on the ground. So it just takes a lot of energy and a lot of time, but it's totally worth it. And the idea is to create models that work in one community and can be replicated elsewhere, so that the next community that wants to do something revolutionary doesn't have to start from building, reinventing the wheel.
I guess my words would just be persistence and not giving up. It gets overwhelming when you're like, how do we do this, and they're throwing stuff at us, but you take that pause and you work with the advocates around you and you just keep pushing forward. You're not alone. There's so many days where we call up other friends from like the New York Youth Coalition. We're like, what do you think about this? And what did you think? They're like, we're on it, we're doing this. I'm like, great, well, we'll do this, and we collaborate. And that just makes us that much more powerful. So we're really appreciative of the ability to do that. But you definitely just have to take that minute and be like, you can't give up. You have to just keep trying and pushing.
Yeah, I guess what I'd add to that is, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Yes, I agree with everything that everyone is saying up here. I would say it is difficult work, but what ties us here together is we do believe in a better world, a just world, a different world. So that can be exhausting because of the systems, white supremacy, patriarchy, like all those things. But climate change, the issue of and environmental justice, is very intersectional. So I feel like there's room for everybody in terms of addressing climate change and the fight for climate justice. I truly believe, from like electricians to teachers to students, like there really, I feel like, is a role for everyone to play. Just the need is huge, and there's so much that we need to get done. But I have the faith that we can get it done with people like you and people on the stage. So that's it.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone. I confess the questions are very interesting. Before we dive into it, I highly recommend that after the program, you stay and you talk to these amazing panelists about the work they're doing and figure out a way to collaborate. The first question is, are you going to Albany on Monday? What do you hope to achieve?
Not going on Monday, but am I? Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. But the New York Youth Coalition, we had a big lobby day where we were championing the climate jobs and justice package. As a coalition, there were like 100+ people there. I think over 80 organizations from the coalition were present, and then we're also continuing to build the drumbeat, and folks are going up to Albany regularly to champion the climate jobs and justice package. We're not going on Monday, but to expect to go up to Albany sometime this month or the next.
Going Tuesday. So I was like, I know. What's going on Monday?
It's the tax the rich.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was like, I need to have a calendar wall on. But yeah, we'll hopefully be there Tuesday. And so again, like all the legislative committees are meeting, and we're not sure yet if we'll get picked, but we are submitting testimony tomorrow before noon, and hopefully we get picked so that we can speak on Tuesday. So if you're in Albany Tuesday, we'll see you then.
Next question. So the next question is, it's cold outside. How do heat protection laws fare in New York to help protect homeless and tenants in needy communities, and issues of access as well?
I don't have probably the complete response, but I know, for example, in the Office of Emergency Management, they have what they call cold blue. So when it hits a certain temperature outside, it's considered too cold, anyone who's unhoused can go to any shelter. That's not a great solution, but that's what EM does. So in addition to that, I'm not really sure what city supports or services are specifically around unhoused individuals and the cold. I would say that cold blue is bare minimum Band-Aid, not really getting people the help that they need. So yeah, I don't have a complete response, but I think that it is like one thing that the city does.
I will add to that, maybe in a couple of years, maybe like yesterday, we should probably start thinking about minimum cooling laws. Because extreme heat is super, super dangerous. And right at this moment, there's no requirement for landlords to keep your house at a livable temperature. So when it gets to be 100 degrees at night for 3 nights in a row, those are conditions that will send many people, kids and the elderly, to the hospital. I feel like there should be some protection in place like that. So.
The only example that I could name from like our end was a real short pilot program that was actually funded by like the Department of Health and the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management, and there was very limited funding that is for preventative measures, but we were doing a program called Be a Buddy where we were training community members to know when there was extreme weather events happening, whether it was heat or cold, a blizzard, a blackout, and community members were being trained to be able to notify other community members who were considered the most vulnerable to be able to, prepare themselves for these temperatures. So while that doesn't address like the homelessness issue, which is so huge in the South Bronx, there were like community-led piloting of programs and solutions that were trying to build resiliency amongst community members so that we could at least warn each other and have like community solutions. But that was such a struggle just because it was really difficult to really think about preventative care and ways to prevent those kind of issues. Not just like say if it's really cold, go to a shelter, but like how do we make sure that people aren't outside when it's really cold? And I don't know if we're there yet. New York, I don't know if we're there yet. And it's kind of frustrating to put that responsibility on community members without the resources and the funding that is really needed to have solutions that are not just like calling someone like, hey, it's gonna be really cold tomorrow, because that's really like where we've been at.
So as far as trying to keep people in their homes, in their units, our group has been trying to fight each of the rate cases. So Con Edison, electric, National Grid, gas, we've been pushing each of them in the rate cases to agree not to shut people off when they fall behind on their bill, when it's a certain degree, cold or hot. And it's been very interesting. The Con Ed rate case is in private, confidential settlement right now, so I can't give you the details. But we have public testimony, so I'm not breaching confidentiality with that. And we argue about heat islands and the fact that there are many communities in New York City that have heat islands, and that should be respected. They shouldn't shut off, for instance, if it's, I think the current is, Con Edison won't shut off if it's 93 degrees 1 day before and 2 days after. I'm like, 93 degrees, 85 degrees in a heat island is dangerous for people. So we've been trying to use scientific studies, Department of Health to make these arguments, but I think, ultimately we're going to have to move for like a citywide and statewide law. It's probably the best way just to protect people from this from happening, keeping them safe in their unit, so then they can stay.
You have the resources on your website as well.
Yeah, we do, and I'll be around to give out business cards on that later too.
Yeah, on that point, I just want to mention that please do check out the Public Advocacy website. We do have a very robust constituent services group, separate office on the same floor that deals with a lot of these issues. So if you know anybody who's having an issue, especially with city agencies and stuff like that, I recommend you guys reach out to us. We'll be here after this event, and if you want to talk more to it, we'd love to let you do it. The next question is, when is the hearing about climate, and where is the waterfront in Prospect Park? I guess that's the question.
Sorry, repeat the question.
Yeah. Listen, whoever wrote this question is feel free to raise their hand and ask the question. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, where the hearing is going to be, where the hearing, when this hearing is going to be, and where.
Oh,
Okay, because there were some, sorry, there's a bunch of different hearings. Yeah, sorry, we're just trying to clarify which specific one, but I believe on, like, if you go to the state website, like, they do have a listing of all the upcoming hearings. I know they're holding a bunch on the budget, in the upcoming, like, weeks. And I think we'll be trying to testify on the health one. But yeah, sorry if not directly answering that question.
Yeah, in the Tuesday hearing, we're hoping that budget, will be tied with the CLCPA. And so it's a way to use the budget process to talk about some of the climate pieces. And the Senate just had a hearing 3 weeks ago on the Climate Action Council scoping plan. So it's good, like, there's momentum, and we're just hopeful that there'll be more and more opportunities. So definitely look at, like, the New York State Senate has a pretty good calendar, so you can see all the different hearings that are happening. Usually they're in Albany.
I'm guessing that part of the question is talking about the waterfront, and I know that Uprose is located in the waterfront area, and so that's the CDC's point, yeah.
Sure, was there any specific thing you wanted to know about the waterfront?
Yeah. I know there's waterfront in Wareham. That's Brooklyn and Wareham.
Yeah. She was asking where the waterfront is that you were talking about.
Got you, yes, okay, so Sunset Park is located just below Red Hook. So if you were to just walk past Red Hook down the waterfront, which I don't know if you can do that, which would be great to have that kind of pedestrian accessibility. But we're located right below Red Hook, and if you go down there, it's a big industrial area. There are factories, there are transportation hubs, there are industrial sites, and actually, we are going to be hosting the largest offshore wind staging site in the country, I think, in the next couple of years, which is pretty exciting because those are green jobs that are coming to Sunset Park. It's going to mean that we can retain some of the working class manufacturing jobs in Sunset Park, and hopefully that will catalyze and attract a number of other manufacturing and support services that can tie into the green economy. Yeah, a lot of exciting stuff is happening on the water.
Daryl, you may want to talk about Bronx because it's very interesting. You guys are surrounded by so many facilities.
It's really interesting because we're like in this little peninsula chunk of the South Bronx that separates us from not just the rest of the Bronx, but literally from even the rest of Hunts Point. Like, there's a line that is drawn by the Bruckner Expressway that separates us from the rest of our neighborhood. People actually decide whether or not they're going to go to that side, and a lot of people don't go to the supermarket, to the park, to anything that it requires them crossing that Bruckner. And our waterfront, just like yours, and if you look at, like, if you go to Jersey, if you go to Queens, if you go anywhere else, like, you're gonna see that there's some similarities. And I'm sure that historically there was an importance to having like a maritime industrial waterfront, but we're on the Bronx River. And the Bronx River, our part of the Bronx River is actually home to the Hunts Point Food Distribution Center, which is the largest food distribution cooperative in the world. The food that goes into almost all of the tri-state area, our restaurants, hotels, supermarkets, stores, come from the Hunts Point Food Distribution Center. And therefore, our waterfront literally has been continuously designed to cater to more industrial spaces. So we do have last mile facilities in our neighborhood. We do have an increase of trucks that are coming to our neighborhood because they've already facilitated that infrastructure for the Hunts Point Food Distribution Center. So now it makes it a really great place for other industry and other warehouses to build in the same place, which for us means we have to say, if you are claiming to want and be interested in protecting the waterfront, then development of the waterfront and what goes on the waterfront has to consider not just like how easy it is for trucks to get in and out, right? Like, it's not even easy for our food distribution trucks to get in and out anymore because we have now last mile trucks trying to be in and out. And so there's this like problem that the waterfront shouldn't have to deal with because we know the value of that access, of being able to walk across the waterfront. We know indigenous people in our neighborhood that use the waterfront as a place for well-being and connections, and so when we talk about the waterfront and like we look at the Hunts Point waterfront, you take the 6 trains to Hunts Point, you're gonna be in the middle of Hunts Point, but just 5-minute walk, you're in this like completely industrial waterfront that looks completely different from the residential neighborhood that's 1 block, 2 blocks away. And you have to go through the industrial part in order to get to waterfront parks. You have to get through that in order to get to community programs like, boat programs and canoeing that we have on our waterfront. Like, you have to cross trucks to be able to get there. And it becomes a real issue in terms of like access to the waterfront and defining how we prioritize what kinds of development is like just for the waterfront.
Yeah, for context, just like Sunset Park, if you look at the South Bronx, the Hunts Point, there's about 3 or 4 peaker plants. There is a Hunts Point wastewater treatment plant. There's a Randall's Island wastewater treatment plant, a Bowery Bay treatment plant, which is near LaGuardia Airport. And there's a heavy truck traffic over there in that area with Fresh Direct and other food facilities. So you can just imagine the community that are sandwiched in between all these facilities that are surrounding them. And obviously, you're going to have higher asthma rate and environmental injustices. So thank you for explaining that. The last questions we have is about, I believe one of the panelists talked about tokenizing the community input and expertise. Can you speak to any examples where that expertise was implemented and used effectively? Looking for success to point out to help replicate. And this came from, I guess, a person put their name and their company, I believe, Andel Poster from Harp Strategies. Okay, great. So thank you for that question.
Passing the CLCPA, I mean, I think that having community and frontline leadership in the steering committee of New York Renewals and in the organizing committee and in the lobby committee and in all those committees, like having that leadership means that and it's not easy. It's not easy. Like, we got to work through some stuff. And sometimes we have to have difficult conversations, like who is leading, what decisions get uplifted, what experiences get uplifted. But we have committed to like using the Hermes principles and using value-based like decision-making so that we can work through those things. And I think that if I had to name one very, very powerful example of like a community vision being, coming true and being implemented, would be the CLCPA. Even though it's not exactly the name and the thing that we wanted in the beginning, but it is.
I could talk about something that's in progress. So Rose is working on developing community solar models that allow for community ownership of solar. So instead of utility-based solar, where all the profits go back into, again, shareholder profits, we are developing solar that is owned by a community organization where the revenues will be able to be directed back into the community. It'll also mean that the people who are subscribed to this solar array, which basically, first of all, allows renters and people who don't, small businesses who don't own their building to be able to participate in solar. It means that they'll be able to have discounts on their energy bills. So we're both reducing energy burden, we're keeping revenues in the community, and then the revenues hopefully will be governed, their use will be governed by folks in the community. So again, that's the community autonomy piece. So yeah, that is hopefully will be a victory soon.
Well, we hope that you take what you learned today and reflect on how you can connect with your community and fight for environmental justice. It is important that we continue to have these conversations and not only speak with one another, but that we all take steps to take action. Therefore, we encourage you to reach out to our sponsors and ask how you can help. Whether you work in or study architecture, communication, law, art, or anything under the moon, your skills are needed. Your voice matters. We'd like to thank NYPIRG for giving us the opportunity to work with Pratt Institute for hosting this. We would also like to recognize our partners here, and sponsors, including those represented on this panel, as well as the New York Renews Coalition, the Staten Island Urban Center, the 350 Brooklyn, and the Alliance for Green Economy. I want to take this time to especially thank my team. We have a key Sena here from our IT department. We have David Khan, who is our environmental and infrastructure organizer. We have Sasha just here as well. This is just the beginning of a series of discussions that the department will be holding going forward. So stay up to date on these and other events and initiatives from the Public Advocate's Office with our text chatbot. It's called The Advocate. Text hello to that, or you can go, we can share this information later as well. 833-933-1NYC to subscribe and receive text updates with vital information for New Yorkers. We hope you have a wonderful night, and I'm handing the stage back to our wonderful partner, NYPER Pratt Chapter.
Thank you again, and thanks again to everyone for joining us tonight. To continue to support our efforts, please follow us and our partners on Twitter and Instagram, and scan the QR code on the way out. For students in the Pratt community, you can get involved right here on campus by joining NYPER's Pratt chapter. Our office, once again, is located in Chapel Hall 007. And we have meetings every week at 8 p.m. in the student union. Stop by our table outside to learn more about how you can take action on campus. Good night, everyone.